Welcome to the Book Faire podcast. My name is Anthony, and June is Pride Month. This year, it is vital to show support and solidarity with LGBTQ+, friends, family, and community members, as trans and gender non-conforming people have been subject to nearly relentless attacks by state and federal legislation. Make an effort this Pride to show that you are a safe space. This week for the podcast, we have an interview with Beth Ferry. The 2026 federal budget proposal almost entirely wipes out the Institute for Museum and Library Services, Scholastic restructures multiple services under a new branch, and Brooklyn Public Library launches a new initiative. Let's begin first with an interview with Beth Ferry, author of Growing Home. Welcome to the show, Beth Ferry. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And just to kick off the interview, could you please introduce yourself for the audience as well as the book we'll be discussing today?
Sure. My name is Beth Ferry, and I am primarily a picture book author. I think I've written and sold in the 40s, a number of books, 42, 43. And we're speaking today about Growing Home, which is my first middle grade novel, and I'm excited to talk about it.
And who are the characters in Growing Home?
So the characters are a little, unusual. So it's set in a house with a family, but the main character is an ivy plant. So just, a plant. And her other, I'm going to say pet, friend is a goldfish named Toasty. And then they meet a spider and another plant, a violet plant. So the main characters are really these four unusual characters who all, live in a house together.
And how would you describe the relationship between Ivy and Toasty? Because that's really where things kick off in this book. At the very beginning, it is just Ivy and Toasty. How would you describe their relationship?
So I think of it as a sibling relationship. So Ivy is a plant who, plants are not pets, right? Maybe. And the goldfish Toasty is a grumpy character. And like so many people, right, aren't grumpy characters. We all believe that the grumpy characters are the best characters. So my favorite characters are the grumpy characters. So he's a pet who is miffed that he is not the favorite pet of the little girl of the family. And she happens to love the plant. And so their relationship is, Ivy's kind of sitting in the glory of being the favorite, and Toasty cannot understand for the life of him how he's not the favorite pet since he's the only pet. So it's one of those, hopefully it comes across as, siblings where, you tolerate each other because you have no choice. You live in the same house. And, maybe hopefully by the end, you realize it's more than tolerance.
You mentioned that Toasty feels that he should be the favorite as the pet of the little girl. Who is the family that's living in this house, and what is their involvement with the plot? What is the scope of their presence in this book?
Yeah, that's a great question because they are not the main characters. So it's a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Tupper and their daughter Jillian, and the parents are antiquarians, which isn't that a great word to say? And so they're interested in, antiques and restoring and selling. They have a shop where they sell antiques, and they have one daughter who is, kind of the object of the desired affection. That's everybody wants her to love them, Toasty especially. And so they're, but they are kind of just like in the background. It's really the relationship between these four like tinies, I'm going to call them. They're these little plant, little goldfish, little spider. But, you need to have life, so the Tupper family provides the life of, they go to work, the little girl goes to school, they come in and out of the house. And ultimately it's their like financial woes that, starts the actual plot of the story. They are, they're not doing so well in their antiquarian world.
And you also said that the four tinies, as you call them, are the main characters, being Ivy, Ollie the new plant, Toasty, and Arthur the spider. Having these personified plants and animals, having written over 40 different picture books, would you say that this is something that kind of carries over from that work?
It's funny because, my first book was called Stick and Stone, where, they are friends, a stick and a stone. So, and I really kind of enjoy, using, non-human characters. because you can also, they can get away with a little more, like they don't need to have parents. Like when you're a stick and a stone, you don't need parents. Like, so yeah, I think it was really fun. It's fun it lets you just be a little more, I'm going to say the word creative. Maybe that's just me. Have even their problems can be like a little off kilter because they're not actual humans. They don't have the same responsibilities. They have no responsibilities. So they're just, like day to day kind of like what's going to happen today. So yeah, I really like characters like that.
It kind of unbinds you from limitations of human characters, especially writing children, especially writing children as the main characters, because you have to work within constraints of things like school, curfews,
safety, right?
safety.
Like
Yes.
safety. Where you don't when it's a goldfish or a plant,
So taking this idea of taking these absurdist kind of plants, personified plants, animals, things like that, things like stick and stone, turning that into a middle grade novel. What were some of the challenges that came along with expanding these ideas beyond the couple of paragraphs per page?
And yeah, because what's interesting when you're writing a picture book, you are so aware of word count. Like word count is like your master. You're supposed to be right around 500, which of course is just, you can go above and below. But I'm very spare with my writing when I'm writing a picture book because I know the art is telling half of the story, and that's just how it's done. You want to use the best, most precise words that is going to convey, your story. So writing this, it was hard for me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I can describe something. Like I've never had to describe anything before. And even dialogue, I feel like there's not so much dialogue in picture books, mainly. There can be some. So I think I enjoyed the dialogue the best. I really enjoyed writing dialogue.
And I also have to point out that this is interesting because a lot of times writers go from writing for middle grade or young adult audiences and then have to scale down to writing for picture books. However, one of the unique things in going from picture books to middle grade is in your life, you've probably read a lot more middle grade and adult novels than you did picture books. Whereas people going in the reverse order don't have as much don't have as many memories of reading picture books. Is that something that you experience when you're looking at this? Did you have a lot to work from works that you've read?
I think that's an interesting question. I think that, you think, oh, I love books. I'm a reader. I should easily be a writer. I know what a good story is, but that's a lot harder to put into practice. And I did. I feel like I indulged myself a little more with this. Like you can't really indulge yourself when you're writing a picture book. Whereas I felt like I was indulging myself with vocabulary and I had a really wonderful editor who was like, this is all great, but is it moving the story forward? So I think my first draft was much, more indulgent is the word I'm going to use. Because, you like what you like, and that's why you write because you like words and you like alliteration. I'm a big fan of alliteration. And so I think she had to rein me in a little bit so that it wasn't so self-indulgent.
And you mentioned working with an editor. I do enjoy getting into some of these industry business side of the conversation. Did you have the idea for Growing Home, or did someone present you with a opportunity with an opportunity, or did someone present you with an opportunity to write a middle grade book and you started from there?
No, so good question. The idea, so a long time ago, many moons, I had worked with Celia Lee, who's my editor at Simon and Schuster, at Scholastic, and she had like said, "Oh, you should write a story about a plant." Like I think she called it Best Fronds, and it was like her idea was, I'm pretty sure, a picture book, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And then I don't know, 7 years pass, and one day I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll try it as a middle grade. I'll have a main character be, a plant. So yeah, so she had planted the seed, to have a plant as a main character as a picture book. And it just turned into, I think I was ready. I think when you, sometimes, when you're, I mean, it's nice to broaden your scope. I've written some graphic novels, but like it's nice to do something different. It's yeah. So the original idea was given to me by the editor who actually wound up publishing this book with a different publishing house, and it kind of felt like all good stuff.
It's really funny that you mentioned that the idea comes from an editor at another company. There's I just love telling this story. It's such a funny story of that author of Goosebumps, R.L. Stine, one of the biggest authors of the pre-internet era, especially for middle grade and young readers. The entire reason he went on to write Goosebumps was a lunch date with an editor who said, teen slasher books are really popular right now. Go home and write a book called Blind Date. And
And
then
did he?
he did. Blind Date was his first like teenage slasher book that became a trilogy that then spurred Fear Street. And then they said, this is great, but we're not getting the 8 to 12-year-old age demographic. Let's write something for that age now. And then and that was Goosebumps. So it's interesting to see how publishing the publishers, editors, how influential they are. And we talked a little bit about this before we started the recording about how you turned in this manuscript and then you saw the recommended age range. You saw you saw the recommended age range for Growing Home. And how did you feel about how this book is being how this book is being received by the publishers, editors, and how do you think it will be received by audiences?
That's a great question. I feel like it's I feel a lot of love that from my publisher for this book. But yes, when I flipped open the cover, I was like ages 6 to 9, and so being a picture book author, age 6 is like my sweet spot. Like this to me is perfect prime time picture book ages. But you also do that kids are reading on their own. They're learning to read. They're reading on their own, and I think maybe this. I don't I would be really interested to see if this is the kind of book that parents, read. How like, you read a picture book to your child, obviously. But a lot of, you read chapters, 2 chapters a night. And I kind of wondering if that's what this isn't going to be. But I don't even know how you find out that information. Is a teacher reading it? I don't know. But I guess I would have thought this was, a little bit older than age 6. I would have thought, maybe second grade to fifth grade. There's some decent vocabulary in here. So, I would love to know how they decide, how they pick, is it length? Is it vocabulary? How they decide the age ranges.
That's a very good question. I've never really thought about that, and I'm probably going to start doing some research on that because that's it's the kind of thing I'm really interested in finding out. Because again, like we talked about before the recording, um, there are things outside of your control. I even mentioned that the text size and the line spacing, it's formatted more like an early reader book, but with the length of a middle grade novel. But that's definitely not within your control. All you really put forward is a word count. They can make the text smaller to shrink the pages, and they can change the line spacing, and suddenly you're not looking at a page with a black and white pencil illustration and saying, yeah, this is like 6 or 7 year olds.
Yeah, and it's something that I don't think about. One of the things that always surprises me is the size of the book. I've never picture books. Some picture books are like so tall. Some are just little squares. Like even every time I get a book, I'm like, oh, look at the size. I'm always surprised by the size. So yeah, this feels like a nice, I don't know, size.
I'm definitely I'm an ebook person. I love my Kindle. I've got a Kindle Scribe that I do all of these notes on, and this is what I used to read Growing Home on. So I definitely had the inverse reaction where I was like, man, this is big.
Wow, that's so funny, right? How many pages is it on that?
It's the same number of pages because it's the PDF.
Okay. Yeah, I find all those, kids are so curious on how books are made. Like it's one of the, I get the question and I'm kind of like, yeah, it's in a factory on a big printer. And I know they cut the pages and sew them, but it's one of those things that like, why isn't there like how the book is made physically? Like they want to know physically how the color gets on the paper, and I really, most people don't know.
And that's definitely why I like to talk a little bit more about the industry side of things, because there are a lot of young aspiring writers who are not very well informed, not on their part, just because the information is kind of gate kept by the people within the industry of just keeping it to themselves. Like the fact that you work with an editor, a lot of young writers are just typing away on drafts and drafts, and then send out a finished version to a publicist, send out a finished version to a publicist, and likely never get published. And so that's the end of it. So their entire experience with writing is just the actual writing and maybe publishing up by themselves on Amazon. And thank goodness for all these independent ways that authors can get published. It's great. So then, like, what is it like on your end coming from a more established position, seeing how people want to know all this information, that all these people want to learn a little bit more about the physical printing, the printing side of things?
Yeah, we take so many things for granted, like like, how does the computer work? I would really like to know. But would I really like to know? Do I want to spend 5 hours reading an article on how it all works? Like, so I think there's that, there's yeah, I want to know, but do I want to put in the time? And so for kids, I don't think they think about it until they have an author standing there. And then, you're talking about your book, and they want to know, like, how do you get the words on the page of the book? Like, thinking I actually do that because, to them, the whole, big factory printing machines, like, doesn't occur to them, because how would they even know something like that exists?
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
it's typically presented to them by the teacher as this is the person that made the book.
Right, exactly, exactly. They made the book. And so kids are like, wow, how'd she do that? How'd the cover get on? Their interest is funny.
We've gotten a little bit sidetracked on talking about the industry, the process. Let's go back to growing home a little bit. Now that we've got these characters of Ivy, Ollie, Arthur, and Toasty, and the Tupper family, what is the driving force of this plot? Because typically you don't have plants and fish and spiders able to influence the world around them. What is it that really gets things moving in growing home?
Yeah, so I mean, the plot is basically, there's a little bit of magic, and I wouldn't even call it realistic, magical realism ish, but there's the fish tank that Toasty lives in. Has a little bit of magic, and when he splashes the other characters, they can do things that are, like Ivy can move around the house, and Arthur can make no, not Arthur, Ollie, the ivy plant, the violet plant, can make things invisible. And so they seem to have, like, all these little, which all seems really cool, and they're all excited and they think they're so special. And Ivy especially thinks, like, of course I'm magic. Like, I'm wonderful. I should be magic. And so, they're kind of just enjoying their specialness, and the goldfish who is bestowing the magic, it feels left out, and he's just grumpier than ever. But ultimately, the plot comes because somebody knows about the tank and how it has magical properties. And he tries, there's always a good bad guy, right? You need to have a good bad guy. So he wants to steal the tank. And so these residents of the house, who don't consider themselves a family or maybe even friends, all of a sudden feel threatened by this outside force. And, sometimes that's what you need, right? You need this outside force to say, like, hey, wait a minute, this is our house. Don't mess with us. Like, it's like the same thing truly with siblings. You're like, I can say anything I want about my sister, but don't you say it. And that's how I feel like is hopefully the sense, is that they, join together to save and protect their own house and the things in it, against this, thief.
So earlier you talked about Ivy and Toasty's relationship, and you now also mentioned that Ivy has a kind of self-inflated sense of worth. She's very me centric, me focused, and
Yes.
one of the questions I had written down was, how does Ivy define friendship?
Yeah. So I think in the beginning, she defines friendship as anybody being interested in her. If someone's interested in her, they're her friend. So yeah, she hasn't had a lot of experience, which was kind of fun too, because, we live in a selfie world. And I find, and I'm sure you find that, self-centeredness is more prevalent. Maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm just noticing it now because I'm older, but I find self-centeredness to be like a shocking, what's the word? A shocking common, yeah, trend. Thank you. A common trend. And so she's kind of the epitome of that. She's so self-centered that she can't think of anyone but herself. So she was fun to, indulge that, and really like everything is just like, I'm great. And of course I should be magic, and yay for me. And, she does realize by the end that, you have to be a good friend if you want to have a good friend. And so that's like a nice little change for her. But she starts off as like, me, me, me.
And how do you go about indulging that personality without making her incredibly obnoxious and overbearing to the reader? Because Ivy, early in the book, is just such a cheery delight. And her quirk of self-centeredness doesn't come across as conceited. How do you go about indulging that without crossing that line?
I think it's because she's a plant. I swear. I think it's because she can't really she's stuck, she can't really, so she's happy with her life. And yeah, she thinks she is the center of attention, but I think she doesn't have the ability to really, really go off the walls because she's a plant who's stuck in a house. So maybe that's why.
And again with Toasty, the same quality applies of he is the grumpy character. He's a little bit jealous, even though he pretends he's not. He's bitter. And again, you're writing this character in almost such a negative way, but by making him a fish, you kind of get a pass on that. Sorry, I just got sidetracked because I remembered reading in the email it said that it's described as a cat in the hat mixed with something else, and I'm thinking, is it just because there's a fish in it?
Oh, that's funny. Is that how they described it?
Yeah, I got the email here. It was like cat in the hat mixed with Catherine Applegate.
Oh, right. Okay. I guess that's great.
It's just so funny. It's like, yeah, Cat in the Hat, The Secret Lives of Pets, and Toy Story is
Oh,
is what they said. It can be described as a combination of those three things. And it just
I never heard that. So interesting.
yeah, that's how they're marketing your book.
Wow. Quite the combo, huh? We'll see, I guess, right?
It is. It's not a bad combination. It's not. It's just funny because again, it's the things that are out of your hands.
So much, right?
And again, it's all about these personifications of non-human characters that gives you that freedom to be a little
Yeah.
bit more creative with their
Yep.
personalities.
Right. Because you ultimately you want readers to like the characters, or they don't want to read about them. And so even grumpy characters can be likable if you can, empathize with their grumpiness. Like you're stuck in a tank. Okay, that's gotta stink.
Empathy is definitely one of the big things with books for young audiences. And how does a young reader, or how can a young reader empathize with the non-human character? What more so, what is the utility in writing a non-human character with the expectation that the audience will empathize with them?
Yeah, and I really truly I think kids are all in. I mean, just my experiences with Stick and Stone, it's really crazy. No one even spends 1 second questioning it. Of course they're friends, and Stick sticks up for a stone, and that's how I think kids are just. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I think they can look at Ivy and they can, you know, imagine her as, yes, not a human, but as a fully realized, plant that they might want to have. And I wonder if people will look at their plants a little differently after reading this. But yeah, I do. I don't think kids have any problem with it. I really don't. I think they're like, oh, this is the character. Great. I'm going to like or dislike him as if it's a dog or a human or anything.
And more so, not just looking at their plants differently, but reading the characterization and seeing that they know somebody who is like this character, seeing reflections of real people that they know in non-human characters. And to kind of, I don't want to throw you a curveball, but this is kind of a deeper question. I like to ask this to all guests on the podcast. Beth, Beth, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer?
I think writers write because number one, they love to read, and number two, they love to write. And I hope that my writing, picture books, and even this middle grade, makes kids want to read. I really think you hope you're writing a book that entertains them, or I think that there should always be, you're leaving with something, you're feeling something. I always say I want my readers to be satisfied. They close my book and they're satisfied. And satisfied is such an interesting, word. They don't have to be euphoric. But they have to feel satisfied, and it makes them want to pick up the next book. And so that's how I kind of see myself. I'm hoping I'm writing books that make kids want to read other books.
Thank you. That was an interview with Beth Ferry. Her new book, Growing Home, is available now. To learn more about Beth and her work, you can visit bethferry.com. Next, we'll be looking at some notable new releases out this week, but first, if you appreciate the work being done with the Book Faire podcast, there are a few ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, favorite, subscribe, or follow the podcast wherever you are currently listening to help push it out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early, as well as links to news sources used in the show. Lastly, the best way to show your support to the Book Faire podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Now, we'll be highlighting some notable new releases, beginning with The Best Worst Summer of Esme's Son by Wendy Wan-Long Shang. Chinese-American 12-year-old Esme's Son yearns to make her strict single mother as proud of her as she is of her talented older sisters. For now, the start of summer marks the beginning of swim team season, when being outside and hanging out by the pool is more important than parental approval. Esme relishes the freedom and easy camaraderie she cultivates with her teammates at her beloved neighborhood pool. But upon discovering that her recent growth spurt has given her a competitive edge, she wonders if swimming might be something she could excel at. As Esme starts to focus on winning, she grapples with what it means to be both a supportive friend and a strong competitor. When her mom starts attending meets, Esme realizes that her mother's support carries an unsportsmanlike undertone as she encourages Esme to view other swimmers as enemies despite being on the same team. Author Shang weaves a compelling tapestry of perennial tween anxieties, threading myriad subjects such as feeling pressured to act more mature, fear of saying the wrong thing, and the stress of familial expectations into a briskly paced tale of sports and community. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, We Could Be Magic by Marissa Meyer and illustrated by Joelle Murray. 6-year-old Tabitha Laurie believes that love conquers all. Then her parents divorce, leaving her heartbroken. To help distract her, Tabby's father takes her to the Disney-esque Summerland, where she meets Princess Madeline, a theme park character who renews her faith in true love. Now 17, Tabby plans to audition for a Summerland princess role while participating in the park's seasonal employment program. She refuses to let her snobby summer roommate, pessimistic coworkers, and a less-than-desirable gig tending a nacho stand shake her resolve. Despite mean-spirited comments that she'd be more suited to a costumed animal character, she auditions for a princess role anyway, and when she doesn't get the part, she devotes all her efforts, energy, and free time to preparing for the next audition opportunity. She also bonds with James, a park character attendant who shares her love for the magic of Summerland despite his own complicated past. Author Meyer charms in this touching graphic novel tale about chasing one's dreams, overcoming obstacles, and believing in magic. Jewel-toned artwork by illustrator Murray evokes fairy tale vibes, making for a cozy and appropriately swoony read. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. Next up, The Beautiful Maddening by Shea Ernshaw. Everyone in Cutwater knows to avoid the Goods, a cursed family that only inflict desire and madness upon anyone who interacts with them. After inheriting a family secret, 17-year-old Lark Good knows this to be true. The tulips growing behind her ramshackle house are responsible for the madness each spring. Her twin, Archer, embraces the curse, enjoying the favors he receives from admirers, while Lark rejects it, isolating herself and yearning for the day she graduates and can move away. When Lark's classmates start begging her for tulips, she discovers that some have been stolen and are circulating around Cutwater, wreaking havoc and heartbreak. As Lark searches for solutions to save her peers, she tries to stop herself from doing the one thing she's always avoided: falling in love. Drawn to Oak, a stranger unaffected by the madness, Lark finds herself spending more time in his company, unsure whether her burgeoning feelings are real or another aspect of the curse. Lyrical prose by author Earnshaw ponders love, portents, and family legacy in an electric romance that weaves together magic and suspense. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. And lastly, Dad Rock Dragon Quest by Joan Reardon. 12-year-old Zadie Drake just wants to rock out with her electric guitar, the only thing that helps her feel connected to her park ranger father, whom she's barely seen in the 5 years since her parents divorced. Instead, she must contend with her mother's boyfriend, Lloyd, a risk compliance officer who cramps Zadie's rock and roll style. Zadie is thrilled when she and her older sister learn that they'll be spending a week with their dad in the forest. Not even being forced to travel with Lloyd can bring her down. When the group is attacked by poachers on the first night in the woods, Zadie realizes that her family is part of a secret society dedicated to protecting magical creatures. Now the 3 Drakes and Lloyd must embark on an epic road trip to thwart their enemies, if they can learn how to get along first. Zadie's arc of self-discovery as she examines her relationships with her father and Lloyd provide a heartfelt counterpoint to the joyful, chaotic premise. It's a fast-paced, exuberant, and genuine adventure set to a high-energy soundtrack. Each chapter opener features a relevant song title. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next, let's take a look at news, starting with another story of the federal government attacking the Institute of Museum and Library Services. By now, we've covered ongoing legal battles between the IMLS and DOGE and the executive branch of the federal government. There have been several court cases already attempting to block the president from shuttering the agency. While those cases are still in progress, further action from the executive branch has been stopped. However, we now see the legislative branch joining the battle, and it's not looking good for the IMLS. Currently, the IMLS costs $313 million to operate for the fiscal year, making up 0.005% of the total budget of the federal government. And recently, the United States House of Representatives put forward their 2026 budget proposal, which includes $6 million for the Institute of Museum and Library Services to conduct an orderly closeout beginning in 2026. As a reminder, the IMLS offers grants to help fund local museums and libraries, which makes up most of their already meager budget. Since DOGE began dismantling the agency, there have been furloughs, which led to a freeze in grants being distributed. Now it looks like there will be no more grants going to public libraries starting October 1st of this year, if the budget passes in its current state. Next up, Scholastic combines multiple businesses under a new name. Several services from Scholastic, including trade publishing, book fairs, and book clubs, will now be integrated under the newly formed Scholastic Children's Book Group. Sasha Quinton, formerly president of the Reading Events Group, will now be president of the new department. Scholastic said the new structure will bolster the company's 360-degree IP creation strategy to deliver its content in as many formats and platforms as possible. Scholastic President and CEO Peter Warwick said in a statement, quote, "Scholastic's ability to work seamlessly across media, publishing, and distribution has never been more important to maximizing the value of our IP and ensuring that the work of our authors and illustrators connects to readers." This appears to be a lateral move for Scholastic Children's Book Group President Sasha Quinton, where now she heads a department that covers much of her previous position. It, however, can come across as downsizing, where multiple departments are put into one, forcing fewer people to oversee the same amount of work. Or in this case, where Scholastic's president implies that they will be pushing to maximize content in as many platforms as possible. This new department may find itself with even more work than before. Now closing out the podcast with a new summer program from the National Coalition Against Censorship. The NCAC and Brooklyn Public Library is launching Summer 2025 Teen Advocacy Institute, Power to the Readers, starting this summer. Even though school is out, the battle for the freedom to read isn't going to stop. This online course, running from July 24th to August 7th, will include remote sessions, workshops, and presentations led by peers and professional speakers. Christine Emmerin, director of NCAC's Youth Free Expression, said, quote, "The program teaches teens to defend their right to read by immersing them in a free, expert-led online summer institute that blends civic education with real-world activism." I reached out to Gianmarco Atosca, Youth Freedom Expression Program Coordinator at NCAC, to clarify a few points. Teen Advocacy Institute Power to the Readers is available to anyone aged 14 to 20 who is passionate about the freedom to read and wants to learn more about advocacy. There are no fees or costs, and space is limited. However, there are some workshops or discussions that will be open to the public. To sign up for Teen Advocacy Institute, you can fill out a form at ncac.org. Registration is open from now until June 16th. That will wrap up another episode of the Book Faire podcast. It is now summer, and it is time to get some summer reading done. You can listen to the Book Faire podcast for weekly notable new releases for new recommendations, or go to your local public library to see what summer reading programs and recommendations are available. Please follow the Book Faire on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to listen to episodes posted early, as well as find sources to information posted in each episode. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.